Hello, everyone. My name is Roman Shersher, your number one resource online for buying properties. I'm very honored today to have on the show Dustin Bynum from the Bynum Group. He's actually a member of my mastermind that we have. We meet about every 4 months in Las Vegas. We leave California in order for us to focus on what's going on and what's working in California. And of course, a little nightlife that never hurts also. You celebrate your wins and talk about exactly the state of the industry. So Dustin, thank you for joining me. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the Bynum Group, where you guys are located, kind of what your focus is. We're missing the second half of the team, your wife, Holly, who is the financial brains of the team, not to say that you don't have financial brains.
That's fully understood.
But tell us a little bit about yourself and the team.
Well, Roman, thank you for having me today. I appreciate it. And hopefully if we have an opportunity, we can have Holly jump in here maybe at some point. But the Bynum Group, we focus in retail real estate in pretty much Southern California from about Kern County south. So, we will do everything from investments to retail, buy, sell, distressed properties, you name it. We got into this business, many years ago, kind of dabbling with fix and flips, especially after the big crash. We saw some opportunities for some, potential and growth and a lot of ROI in properties. So, of course, we did what every new flipper does, run out and grab a property and, pretty much tripped and skinned her knees pretty bad. Realized very quickly what not to do. So, we're real.
The opposite of beginner's luck.
It was exactly the opposite of beginner's luck. You can't put on HGTV and expect that you're going to go out and conquer the world. So, we thought we knew just about everything there was to know, and we found out really quickly there's a lot of tips and tricks that you really some of it's just pure experience, networking with the right people, having the right go-to people to rely on as resources to guide you along the way. And when we first started, we didn't have that, so it took a lot of scar tissue before we started figuring out what the cadence and rhythm and the right things to do and what not to do were in this business, for sure. So
the power of the team, right?
The power of the team. Yeah, for sure. You really do need to find out who the right people are and what their strengths and weaknesses are, their core competencies, and kind of leverage them to put the whole package together. Not one person can do it all on their own.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why we created the program that we did, House Buying Blueprint. It's not to say that somebody should go about buying a property on their own. It's to empower them alongside their agent to work as a team, because you need to work. The dollars are so big in real estate that you need to have all your ducks in a row, and you need to have a number of professionals involved in the transaction to make sure it goes smoothly, to make sure that you buy it correctly, and of course to make sure that you offload it correctly. I always like to say that you don't make your money in real estate when you sell. You realize your gain when you sell. You make your money in real estate when you buy it, and how you buy it correctly.
That's a very, very true statement. That's exactly the thing that we didn't know when we first started jumping into investment properties, for sure. Right. Is we were, really kind of chasing the wrong thing just right out of the gate. So it took a few deals before we figured out what the secret sauce was there to do it right.
Right. Absolutely. So you're focused in which market? I know that you mentioned everything from Kern County down to where? Down to San Diego, or is that too far?
Yeah, San Diego's a bit too far for us. Probably right up to the San Diego border, but a large portion of our business really tends to be San Bernardino and Riverside counties. We do go into LA and Orange County on occasion, but that's starting to get kind of on the peripheral of where we're really primarily focused. I would say large part of our work is in the high desert, Apple Valley, Hesperia, Victorville, Adelanto. And then once we go down into the lower desert areas like Fontana, Riverside, Corona, areas like that.
People that don't know that area, the high desert, most prominent city there is Palm Springs.
Actually, that would be a low desert community. So probably the most prominent area in the high desert would be most known as either Hesperia or Apple Valley.
Apple Valley. Victorville also high desert, or is that too far?
Victorville is also a high desert, actually kind of sandwiched right there in between Apple Valley and Hesperia. Hesperia most well known for Dale Evans and Roy Rogers and kind of developing that area. I'm guessing, probably in the 60s-ish,
right.
Maybe not super hip on the history, but certainly you see a lot of monuments to their name up here in the high desert.
Right. Okay, so you guys focus a lot on buyers. Your power team, you and your wife, in that you handle the real estate side. You're also very handy yourself. You do a lot of flips as investors yourselves, and you do the majority of the work, working with alongside other contractors and subcontractors. And your wife handles what aspect of the business?
So largely her background is purely financial. So she comes from around 25 years of financial backing, which really kind of gives her an edge on really understanding the cradle to grave component of how to finance a person into the retail aspect of getting into a property. So a lot of what she does is really, everything from, credit counseling, really getting somebody prepared to purchase that home, if their credit is not up to par, working with her to kind of figure out what the things that need to be done to get themselves into a credit situation where they can get qualified, and not just necessarily getting qualified, but getting qualified with, maybe a more desirable interest rate. So, run the scenario by me.
Someone calls your team, they're in your area, they say, we want to find a house. Take us through the process that the Bynum group goes through to take this person from phone call to home ownership.
Well, a lot of times the leads can come in through all kinds of different sources, right? It could be anything from a lead generation service like a Zillow or Choya or even a Facebook ad to somebody that calls us direct. But let's just say, hypothetical scenario, we get a call. Typically, I'll go out and I'll meet with that person at, whichever property was of initial interest. And once I get to that property, I kind of start finding out a little bit more about what that person's looking for, right? Is this, did you just see something on the internet that caught your eye and you wanted to come by and see it? Have you been looking at this property for a while? What's the motivator, right? So kind of find a little bit about what they're doing. And then through those courses of conversations and questions, kind of try to find out where they are in terms of, are you qualified to purchase this house? Are you buying this house cash? Are we looking at some sort of FHA deal? What might your purchasing situation look like? And then
you'll take them. They'll call you. You'll take them to the first property, and then you'll begin vetting them from there. Or will you start running credit and running their financials and do all that before you even begin looking?
Usually, we let the clients kind of set the pace, right? When this unfamiliar person right over the phone, that they may not be comfortable starting to disclose tons of financially personal information right then and there. So it does really help to get face to face with that person, be able to hand them a business card, show them some sort of credentials, give them some sort of information on who you are, maybe even take some printed materials along to kind of give them a portfolio of your work. So you can say, this is what we do. This is how we help people. And what's your situation look like so that we can help you better? Right. So we will at times, on occasion, we'll get somebody that wants to just, right out of the gates, go on the phone. And that's fantastic. We can help them like that. Most people are a little bit apprehensive as far as giving that kind of information out right there on the spot. So we'll go meet them at the property and, see where to go from there.
Okay. If it's someone they're comfortable with you or that you're comfortable with, will you take them through the financial process first? Will you vet them?
Of course, yeah. I usually what I'll do is from the real estate side, I'll just ask the basic questions. You know, are we prepared for closing costs? Are we prepared for down payment? If so, how much? Can you get us your W-2s? Can you get us your bank statements? These are all the information that the lender is going to, require anyways, right? So if we can harvest that information right up front, then the next step is, trying to get them paired with, a lender that can really, help them to the degree that they need. Sometimes they'll be working with a lender that's already kind of put them in the position where they want to look for a house anyways. If that's the case, great, we'll work with that particular lender. Most people, they have the order of operation backwards. It's jump in the car on any given Sunday, run out and see if you can get a realtor to open a house, and then, oh, by the way, we're not qualified to buy the house yet, right? So usually we have to backpedal, the particular client and see, where they are financially and if they are in a position where they should actually be out looking for homes, or do they have some legwork to do?
Right. My point exactly. Yeah. My point exactly. I always recommend get pre-qualified first. You may not realize how much you qualify for. What if you qualify for hundreds of thousands of dollars more than you thought you would, and then you've been looking at homes that are half the size that you could get, and you need that extra space? Or the other way around, of course. What if you think you're qualified for $1 million, and once you run the qualifications, you're actually qualified for only $750,000? There's a huge difference in home, in a $750,000 home compared to $1 million home. And of course, I'm talking Los Angeles values. That's not the values out in desert areas or in most areas in the country. But my point is just that until you run that pre-qualification, give that mortgage broker, and I recommend using mortgage brokers, not banks. There's just more programs that they have available to them. Until you run your pre-qualification, or even better, your pre-approval, you don't really know which home you can get. You don't know, you're barking up the wrong tree. You could definitely be barking up the wrong tree. And I would say about half the time you are, if you haven't gotten yourself pre-approved. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think you're right on the head. Is this conversation is repetitive, is constant. It's with almost every single client I come across. Right out of the gate, hey, you don't have to party, and usually they're not qualified. So, getting the message out about how to prep for buying that house, that first house, is really important, because your search, your time spent in your searches is much more meaningful when you know how much home you can afford right out of it.
Yeah, agreed.
Generally, people will search on the much more conservative side of what they think they can afford until they see what a lender actually can approve them for. Right. And if you could get, like you said, hundreds of thousands of dollars more money lent to you for the purchase of a home, it makes a big difference in what kind of home you're going to get, quality of home, area that the home's located in. I mean, it can be a night and day difference.
Absolutely. So let's assume that your buyer is already pre-qualified, pre-approved. You know exactly what they can get. You start looking at properties. Give us some tips and tricks that you use out in the field on either getting a home or making an offer on a home that they like.
So let's see. So just get a home. For me, I think the first step is be sure that you interview the agent. Make sure the agent that you're working with is going to work out well with your personality. There are agents out there that'll say, "Hey, here's 5 houses. Pick 3. I'll put an offer in on one, and that's what we're going to do." Right? We don't do that. I usually let the client set the pace. We'll see as many houses as they like to see. And that may be, in some cases, I've had people go 30, 40 homes before we put an offer on one. I think the idea is you would right out of the gate And you should know before you even start searching, do we need something that's a fixer? Do we need something that's move-in ready? If we're understanding what our qualifications are we only searching for houses that are going to be FHA financeable, right? So that might be a good portion of the properties that you're looking for out right from the start. So the idea is make your home touring time as meaningful as possible, so that you don't become snowblind and seeing so many houses that you forget, 15 houses down the road what the first one looked like.
Right.
So that's an important, a super important piece.
I recommend always taking notes on the properties, because although you see the first property, it's vivid in your mind. By the time you see the 10th, you don't remember every single detail of that home.
That's 100% true. Whenever I do home tours, we do cheat sheets. We give a quick synopsis or a summary of each property, and then I ask my clients to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10.
Right.
And be sure that they put something that's noteworthy or meaningful about that particular property that really appealed to them, so that they can remember, right? And then sometimes we do have to take a second showing to just check that property out.
Right.
As far as placing offers on property, well, so that's an interesting situation, because I can tell you that the climate up in the high desert is very different than the climate that we see in LA, Orange County. Home buying market is.
Right
now, what I'm seeing in the high desert is houses under 300,000 are selling like hotcakes. I mean, it's just a constant flow. They're moving very, very quickly, and because they're moving very quickly, that means there's a lot of very aggressive offers being put in on properties. So being sure that you have a strong offer written in the best way possible is really a very important thing. So
not just price, but terms.
It's not just price, it's also terms, and also, making sure that your agent, before they're placing an offer on the property, that they're not just placing an offer blind and pencil whipping an RPA. It's that they're actually pulling some comps and finding out what that property sells for, right? Let's take a look at that neighborhood and find out, was the other agent doing a blind strategy? And
Dustin, you cut out a little bit. You were saying you want to check what the other agent is what?
Yeah, you hold on, you froze up there.
Yeah. Lost the connection for a second.
I'll just check too.
Time out. Okay, so you're saying you want to check to see what the other agent had what?
The other agent is actually list property low as a pricing strategy to try to create a multiple counteroffer situation. That's something that we see that happens in the high desert quite often. Mm-hmm. So, just because the house is listed at 250 doesn't necessarily mean that the comps or the appraisal won't come in at 280 or 290. Mm-hmm. That's one thing to see.
A technique that listing agents use out there to create a buzz for the property is putting the property less than they actually want to sell it for, and it creates more kind of like a feeding frenzy. A lot of people show up, creates an emotional response in the buyers, so that they bid each other up past the hope is that there's enough buyers and enough interest and enough demand that it puts you up far surpassing what you thought you would get if you listed it at market value, for example.
That's exactly it, and that's something that we see that's a pretty recurring strategy that happens at the under 300 price point. So, in fact, I'm working with clients right now, and we have 3 different files, all within multiple counteroffer situation, which is very strange because you see in other areas of Southern California, the market is much slower. We're not seeing multiple counteroffer situation in maybe Orange County, for example.
Exactly right.
Up in the high desert, and it does tend to occur at that 200 to 300 price point. There's a lot of folks that are leaving LA and Orange County because of price point to get into that $300,000 area, because it's much more affordable. You get a lot of bang for your buck in those areas.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the market has shifted. It's a different market today than it was even 4 months ago. And here in my market, Los Angeles, And like you said, Orange County, it's really slowed down. And year over year, we've seen about a 20% decline in actual volume of sales, which is significant. And we've also seen a 15% increase in inventory on the market. So those two factors, and also price decline, we saw for the first time between last month between December of 2018 and January in 2019, it was a small price decline, but a price decline nonetheless. So there's definitely a feeling that the market has topped out and potentially could be on its way to a decline, a correction, or potentially just at least a flattening. Now, that can mean an opportunity for buyers in many cases, because when the market's hot and it's appreciating and you have multiple offers on every single property, I don't care who the best agent is, they're not going to get the property for their buyer when the next offer over is going to give them $100,000 more for it. But in this type of market, terms can make a difference.
You broke up. I think you completely cut up there, Roman.
Yeah, I was just talking about the status of the market here in LA and how many feel that it's topped out and potentially even in the beginning stages of correcting. And that could mean a real opportunity for buyers, because if you're an agent, you could be the best agent out there. But if you're in a multiple offer situation and the next guy over is offering you $100,000 more for this property, you're not going to get this property for your client, no matter how vast the network you have and no matter how good a negotiator you are. So
that's 100% true. Yeah, that's a gift.
Talk to me about what you think is in store for buyers in this current market and some ways that they could take advantage of it for themselves.
So what's in store for buyers? I think you hit on it just a bit there, is that things do seem to be shifting. We are seeing more inventory coming on market. I'm certain that in the San Bernardino County area, I'm seeing it to some degree in Riverside County. I'm less knowledgeable in LA and Orange County. That's probably a little bit more in your territory there. Yep. Certainly across the board, the trend has been in Southern California that the inventory is increasing. So what's happening inventory-wise is sellers are spending more days on market because there's more options for sellers to go through, or buyers to see. So we're seeing some properties they just kind of sit and they kind of linger on market. Doesn't matter how many open houses the listing agent is doing, they're just not getting the buyers in there. And then other areas we're seeing where the price points are really low, it becomes a feeding frenzy. So it's incredibly volatile right now in terms of what you get in one area versus another area. So I think the main overarching component here is that in most areas there's a lot of inventory to choose from. How fast that inventory moves really depends on price point. So, for example, if you're in a $600,000 market, you're probably not moving quite as fast as somebody that's a $250,000 market. So,
right.
The scale directly changes. If I have buyers coming from, say, Corona, where it's a $600,000 market, and they start slowly moving out of that area because price, affordability, features, bang for your buck, and they start moving towards maybe Fontana, and they start maybe looking in Oak Hills, they start looking at Hesperia. They can get a half-acre piece of property for $300,000 as opposed to maybe a 7,000 square foot lot in Eastvale for $650,000, right? So it's a huge difference in what they can get. So, the $600,000 properties are kind of, they're just kind of hanging out there a lot more days on market as opposed to something that's a lot less expensive.
Yeah, while we were going over this, I started looking at Riverside and San Bernardino. Riverside had basically was flat during that period. December to January, 0.5%, small increase. So median price went from $398 to $400, which is basically flat. But sales decreased 14%, 13.9% year over year, and 15% from the month before. So we're seeing a slowdown of sales. San Bernardino went down, price-wise, went down almost 2%, and that's pretty significant. It went from the median price in December was $295, median price in January was $277, a reduction of 1.7%. It shows, January, I'm sorry, no. Went from 295 to 290 in December to January. So it was down 1.7%, okay? But over year, still January of last year, median price in San Bernardino was 277. It's now 290, and that's still an increase of 4.7%, which is great. Sales, though, this is alarming. Sales year over year, last January compared to this last January of 2019, sales declined by 19.2%. So 1/5 of the market has been eliminated in the last year and is not purchasing. We have a 1/5 decline in the overall sales volume. That's pretty significant. And this is what I'm seeing throughout all of Southern California is we're having a decline in sales. So when you have a decline in sales, what that means is that the inventory is rising because less houses are being sold. And when there's more inventory on the market and you have a buyer that has more to choose from, that buyer has more negotiating power. Is that correct?
I agree with that 100%. Yeah. If you're in a position where you can walk down the street and get a comparable property in the same neighborhood, the power is definitely in the buyer's hands, right? Yeah. So that's a huge point, a huge thing to point out with any buyers is that whenever you have higher inventory, better for your client.
Yep, definitely agree. What are some ways that a buyer, for example, can speed up the process? Let's say that they really want to get in as quickly as possible. Typical transactions today last anywhere from 45 to 60 days if you're getting loans. Obviously, cash is pretty quick and get in and out in about 7 to 14 days. But when you're dealing with lenders, right now I'm seeing about 30 on the fast side, and realistically about 45 days, and it can go outwards past 60 days if not all the paperwork is in order, right?
That's correct.
So what's some good ways that a buyer can speed up the process?
All right. Well, so depending on the lender, a lender plays a big role in this area as far as how quick they can, how quick they can move. But most of the time, the weak link in the scenario is not the lender; it is the potential buyer providing documentation to that lender so that they can vet them out, more thoroughly for underwriting. So that means providing 2 years of taxes, providing bank statements, providing those W-2s if provided your stated income, and being sure that you can get all that information into the lender in a very timely manner. Now, if you're preparing to buy a house, you should be already pulling those documents and getting them prepared to show. But not everybody has their taxes or information, handy or available for them right there on the spot. So sometimes they have to go back to their tax guy, maybe they have to pull the documents, and then that can slow things down significantly. So, there are a handful of lenders out there that can fund deals in about 18 days. And that's, that can be a regular conventional type loan. It really all depends on whether or not that buyer is really truly prepared to move forward in the process and whether or not you're working with a lender that can move at that pace.
So speed up how quickly you give your lender back the information. And of course, it also helps then to get that pre-approval, because then you've already gotten all those docs in. You're ready to roll as soon as you get that acceptance, right?
100%. Once you have that pre-approval, pretty much the lender is just waiting on you to pick a house.
Yep.
They know what they're funding against. So that being the case, most of the delay is really going to be on the buyer themselves. So the buyer's, presenting, hey, we're in a situation, we just put in notice with our landlord, it's an urgent move out situation. Well, time is of the essence. Typically the conversation with that buyer is, well, how quick can you get the documentation into us? How quick can we get your lender to provide the approval, and let's get you underwritten. So if some lenders will actually underwrite the buyer based on their information right up front, and if you can do that, you're golden. That will really trim down your time quite significantly.
Yeah. Let me, you're quite handy. Most of the renovations you guys do are at your control. You project manage those pretty much.
Very true.
You even do some of the work. So give me some really good tips for buyers out there on what to look for when they're inspecting a property.
It's my favorite subject.
I hit the nail on the head.
Yeah. So what we're looking for in this category is what we call lipstick on a pig, right? If we just take the old property and throw some paint on it and call it newly renovated, that's not what we're trying to look for, especially if you're looking for a house that's going to have some value to it.
Yeah.
So, most things, for most buyers, there's a lot of things that are really within your realm of control. Flooring and paint is stuff that you can just go right down to your big box store, pick out. If you buy enough of it, they'll give you a free install with it anyways. The guys will come put it in for you. You really don't need to get into hiring a contractor to have that kind of work done, right? That's well within the realm of a typical homeowner kind of standard maintenance type stuff. Things that you're going to look for in terms of what does it mean for the value of this property is, are we looking at kitchens that have been remodeled already? When you start getting kitchen remodels and bathroom remodels, those are the areas where you have the biggest amount of spend in a property typically. And it's also an area where you have, quality of work can vary between contractor to contractor.
Yeah.
Cost can vary between contractor. Your particular area that you're working in. So,
Dustin, can you repeat that? You said costs can vary between contractors. And what'd you say after that?
So just to repeat or just to recap, quality of contractors, quality of materials, and costs can vary. From contractor to contractor, from vendor to vendor, and from general area to general area. So it depends. How close are you to the stone yard? You can get fabricated materials, or are we getting hand shaped stone materials? A lot of these things matter. So I tend to, when I'm walking through a property with a buyer, I'm looking for what was the easy renovation solution. When you walk through a property versus did somebody put some time and care and money into the renovation on a particular kitchen or bath or whatever it might be, right?
So what do you look for? Where do you go right away? You open up the drawers, you open up the cabinets, you look at the seams. What do you look for?
All of the above. So when it comes to stonework, I look for seams. I want to see whether or not the seams are butted nicely, whether they have rough edges, have they been polished out, are they filled with caulking or grout? What is the quality level of that stonework? I look around the edges of the trims to find out whether or not the stone has been edged properly, if it's been stone shaped, if it's got a contour, what they call Roman ogio around the edges. Those tend to be higher in quality, signs of quality craftsmanship in your stonework. Did they get the pack of hinges when they refinished the kitchens, or did they put the soft close hinges?
You cut out a little bit about the hinges. I heard the last thing was the rounding of the granite. Can you repeat that last part?
So when it comes to Did they put ball bearing guides on the drawers with the soft close hinges, or did they just put the budget hinge from Home Depot, like right there in the in the cabinetry? So the cost difference is really pretty negligible in those two kinds of products, but it makes a huge difference in the way the property's finished out. So
Okay.
I mean,
talking about cabinets, doing the soft close, right, and the actual hinges. Okay.
Soft close hinges, roller guides on the drawers with soft closures as well. Whether or not the kitchen is finished in hardware that makes sense, meaning do we have smooth surfaces, or do we have everything finished in the same sort of holes and guides? Meaning, if we have brushed nickel hardware in there versus oil rub bronze, are they all matching? I've come across a lot of properties where somebody's tried to renovate and they get two buttons that look the same, and then the next cabinet over is similar, but it's just off enough that it's an eyesore, and you certainly don't want to have somebody trying to sell you that it's a completely renovated, piece when it's kind of mismatched and disparate.
Okay.
Same thing goes for bathrooms, right? Do we have, off the shelf freestanding vanities that you can get at any major big box store, or do we have built-ins? Both are acceptable. Depends on the design and feel of the room. Are they fiberglass countertops with molded in basins, or do we have actual stone work in the bathrooms with nice separated basins mounted in that stone? So those things are all nice touches, and make a big difference in the way the house presents, the way it shows, and just the quality of craftsmanship that went into the renovation. So, right.
What about systems? The major systems. How can a buyer, let's say most of the buyers out there, even if they're looking at renovated homes, they're looking at 60, 70, 80-year-old homes.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be buying. If two things. Number one is what should they watch out for? I know the inspector is going to check majority of that stuff, but also how concerned should they be if they have a system issue in a renovated home when they go to purchase? Most buyers out there, when they see renovated, they think that they're getting a brand new house. That's not the case at all. You're getting a newly finished house, but the age of the home underneath, the organs, the internal organs are the same, no matter how much plastic surgery you've had on the outside.
Right. I think that's actually a really, really good way to put it. Is that's why a lot of times when we're talking about renovated homes, we call it a facelift. Right. It's usually the most appealing items in the house to give you the most bang for your buck. Which is going to be your paint and aesthetics. But to the point of the systems, when you got something that's like a 60-year-old house, you certainly definitely want to get your home inspector to go into the details as deeply as you can on that. They may or may not be able to based on what they have accessibility to. But, if you're looking at a property that's old enough and has, clay pipe to a septic tank, and we've got no documentation on a certification for that septic tank, you could be into some big bucks in replacing that system. And, starting price tag at about 10 grand.
Right.
That can be a huge problem for a buyer right there, not knowing what the guts of the property are really, going to leave you with some serious maintenance in the near future. Same thing goes for AC units. If the property's old enough, it may have not had an AC unit installed or a furnace installed that is what we consider a contemporary design. It may have only had a fireplace, for example. Now we see that, or maybe had gas wall heaters.
Right.
Over the years, were those swapped out? Were those patched over? Was something else added in its place? What was the quality of work that the property? Age plays a big role in terms of how the internal systems of the property leaves you with recurring maintenance in the future. So it's something that a buyer has to be prepared to address, or even potentially leave some room in budget to maybe be replacing systems, almost immediately. So it just depends on the property. Certainly, you're probably not going to see a whole lot of FHA buyers in a property that's that old, because it just may not pass an FHA. Yeah, they're just not usually up to that kind of code.
Right.
But they may be. Somebody may have gone in and renovated it and made it FHA compliant, and brought the house kind of up to speed for that kind of thing. But there still leaves a question to the buyer as to whether or not a property that is of that age and vintage is really the right house for them, and whether or not the recurring maintenance on an older home is worth it for what they're looking for.
Right. Okay, so I'm a buyer. I go see a home I like. I love it. I tell you, Dustin, I want it. I see the price. I'm good. I give you full access to go even a couple of grand over the asking price. What are you going to do to get that house?
So we're gonna put in an offer. The first thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna take a look at the comparables in that area and make sure what they're asking for on that property makes sense to the offer, right? Right now is not a climate where I see people needing to fall all over themselves to get a property and pay over market value, and certainly not a lender that's going to be willing to stand beside you on that. So you're talking about getting into bidding wars and things like that. That's not a good place to start off with an offer. So pull the comparables on the area, find out what that property's worth, discuss it with the client, find out what the overall acceptable price point is going to be, and then submit an offer strongest. So when I say submit a strong offer, like you mentioned earlier before, Roman, it's not just the price point, because if, let's say, for example, we put in an offer at $300,000, but I'm asking $10,000 back at closing costs, that's not really a $300,000 offer, right? It might look sexy in terms of how it looks, comes up on the first page of the RPA, but most people are going to be savvy enough to see that, hey, I'm taking a $10,000 hit on the back end of that.
Right. You're netting $290. It's not, offer's not $300.
That's correct. So, we want to be sure that when we're structuring the offer, that we're looking at what the best terms are going to be, and is it appropriate to be asking for closing costs? So if the buyer in this situation needs the closing costs because they're an FHA buyer and they don't have the money, we're going to be asking for it anyways. But certainly the question is it possible for them to be beat out by another offer? Yeah, the same offer with no closing costs is significantly better in terms of the seller. So we want to try to work and offer the strongest possible way we can, right? And that means if we're in a competition situation, like I said, I'm seeing a lot of that right now. You may want to try to work with the lender and see if we can include closing costs into the deal. That might be one way to go about it, rather than writing the offer for $310 with $10,000 back. We could just offer the opposite, and that makes it puts you at least in a situation where you're going to be competitive with conventional, right?
Right.
So
FHA is not a conventional loan. An FHA loan is inferior to a conventional loan because it's harder to qualify for an FHA loan. And another reason is because the bank forces the buyer, all parties in the transaction, to sign something called an amendatory clause. And that amendatory clause says basically that buyer can exit at the very last minute and must be returned their deposit, and with no harm to the buyer whatsoever. And that's very true. As a seller, that's not my favorite type of buyer. I want somebody to lock in, not cancel on me 31 days later, where I've eaten up all these days on market that people see and think I'm desperate because I had a buyer that fell out at the very last minute and cost me 30 days on market, right? And I didn't get anything for it.
That's where you need to, with your buyers right up front, you got to talk about that that EMD deposit not being released back to you if you bail at the very end of the transaction, because certainly for the seller, and this is something that's important, and I don't know how many agents discuss with their clients. When you bounce out of a deal like that because cold feet, whatever the reason, doesn't matter. Maybe your financial situation has changed. It could be any number of reasons, doesn't matter. But you exit the transaction, you created damages for the seller, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Deposit is to show how much skin you have in the game to be sure that you're able to put forth the financial wherewithal to close that transaction. The problem with the FHA buyer is that, exactly as you said, is the mandatory clause. They have the exclusive right to exit for any reason, no questions asked, and the seller is out. They lost 30 days on market. Now, for a seller that's just put his house up at the beginning of April, and you've wasted his time now into May, which tends to be peak seasons for real estate, he's going to be really unhappy with you.
Yeah, I mean, you can't just want to dance with somebody and then step all over their feet and want them to dance with you again, or want them to finish the dance with you. You've caused them a lot of damage. They may not be able to dance again for a long time because you stepped all over their feet. Just to put it in an analogy. I would say that buyers need to be very cognizant of this, is that they're causing a lot of damage to sellers when they bail on their transactions. And so therefore you want to be as quick as possible in your inspections. You want to be as quick as possible in your loan contingencies and all your contingencies to release them from the transaction if you decide you're not going forward, because you're causing them a lot of harm by staying in that transaction and adding days on market during periods when you really already know that you're not going to be doing it, or you're having trouble and you don't feel that you're going to be able to go through with that transaction for the seller. So because of that, and sellers know this, and listing agents know this, and they educate their sellers, and that's why FHA, VA has the same type of clause. These type of loans, these government-backed loans, are not the favorite of sellers because they go with a conventional loan. Once a seller releases their deposit and releases their contingencies, and their deposit is at risk if they bail at the last minute. That's not the case in an FHA or a VA loan.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely true. And just in tips, when it comes to moving, at pace, when you're working, once your agent has placed an offer on a property, it's really important. As the buyer, sometimes the buyers are a little bit in the dark. They're on the emotional roller coaster already, and the agent may or may not be necessarily communicating. The key is to work with an agent that's going to be giving consistent updates with the listing agent, right? The listing agent's job is easy, right? He collects offers, he presents offers. They make the best choice of what's given to them. The buyer's
negotiations.
Yeah. If a buyer's agent is not communicating regularly, or the listing agent has to maybe chase them for information, it starts kind of leaving a bitter taste in everybody's mouth because you're not sure where everybody sits with the buyer, right?
Right.
Is that buyer, kind of iffy? Is that, or are they, case in point, just recently we had a file that, husband and wife were purchasing a property, and they got right into their inspection period. They're 2 weeks into the transaction, and rather than buying a property, they decided they're going to file for divorce. So, things happen. Sometimes fact is stranger than fiction, but the agent in this case knew that that was happening earlier on and kind of hid it, hid the information. So,
what she think? She thought they'd get back together?
or was trying to counsel him through it to be sure that she got her question.
You got a nice romantic dinner, delivered flowers on his behalf to her, and the marriage together, not only the real estate transaction.
Right. So so there's some self-interested components there for making sure that they don't completely split. And if they do split, they can wait till after the transaction closes.
All right. Get the house first, then you can split.
That's right. So
it's not the best fiduciary duty by this agent.
No, this would not be. This is not an example of what to do for sure. Right. But we see all kinds of very strange and unusual things in the course of doing this. So the main thing is communication is always key. Being sure that you announce your intent, being sure that if there's even an inkling that the buyer has some concern about something, is the refrigerator going to be included in the deal? Because I thought that it was, right? Those little details are all gotchas, right? You don't want to wait till day 29 in the transaction and find out, none of the appliances are included in this deal. It was marked there on the RPA deal.
Right. And this goes again to the quality of the buying agent. A lot of buying agent, they just dump a bunch of docs on documents on their buyers, expect for them to read it, and then a buyer beware type of mentality. That's not a good buyer's agent. A good buyer's agent is going to take you through the ramifications of all your decisions throughout the process and uncover the issues and uncover the language behind a lot of the marketing that a listing agent does. It reminds me of this joke I heard that an listing agent's calling his seller saying, okay, so the property is flooded. Okay, great. We're going to describe your home as an island getaway.
I may have actually shown that property.
Yeah, okay, you may have. Yeah. But this is a buyer's agent's job, is to decipher all this information, right?
Right.
The spin that all these agents put on everything, a quaint home. That means it's got a really small lot or a really small actual house. It's one of those mini homes, the small homes that are out there.
So there's that kind of brings up an interesting sidebar, which is when does adjectives become puffery, right? And I think a lot of agents out there dance a line on what to see, but in terms of most buyers are attracted to what they see on the internet. Right. So whatever pictures come up first, and if it's the first 3 sexiest photos of the property, they may want to go see it in person. Typically, you'll see less views on a property that somebody's photographed with their camera phone. But as far as a buyer tip, don't let that necessarily discourage you from seeing a property, because the property wasn't professionally photographed doesn't mean that it's not one that you want to see. So don't let mysticism of what you see on the internet necessarily be your sole guide into touring properties. Take a look at one with the camera photos, because
I like that a lot. Let me dig deeper in that. If a listing agent, is taking a picture of the house with their camera, then I'm going to say that that's not the best listing agent out there, that they're not investing into the property. They're not marketing it as widely as they should to get them as much buyers to take a look at this property and to get as much demand into the house. In which case, a really good buyer's agent will be able to negotiate the heck out of that property and maximize the return that buyer is going to get on a house like that. I would actually go one step further and say, look out for those houses and focus on those houses, because you're going to get the best deal from those properties.
There's and kind of in that same vein of thought, right, as far as buyer's tips and selecting a good buyer's agent. If you break down real estate agents, performance in, at least in California, you find out that very quickly there's only about a third of them that are actually top performers in the state. So that means 60.
I don't even think it's that much.
I think depending on the area that you're from, it may even be less.
Yeah.
But just shooting from the hip, the numbers are about, I'm going to say, being safe, about 30%. That means 60% of the agents that you're going to work with are weekend warriors, right? which means that I'm in a very, very good position that if they're trying to hold down their 9-to-5 job and they're just trying to list this property on the weekends, that they're probably not giving it a full 100% effort. So I definitely am going to try to target those for my buyers as a choice, because the chances are that their negotiating skills are not going to be up to par. So I'm going to be able to get a better deal for my buyer with with a listing agent that, as opposed to somebody who's maybe a top performer.
I love it. I love it. And I think that's how we're going to end today. I think that we saved the best for last. Best tip of the interview so far is look for the houses that have the worst pictures, that are represented by the agents who are maybe not full-timers, weekend warriors, as you put it. Focus on the properties that really need to that don't look like they're either in the best condition or being represented the best, because those agents are not marketing the way that they should. There's not going to be as many people bidding on that house. And if you really like that house, or you want to make the renovations necessary to that house, then leverage your team, your buyer's agent that you vetted correctly, to go in and negotiate on your behalf, work with that agent, make sure all of your ducks are in the row, make their life easy. They're weekend warriors. They don't have all the time to go through the necessary process. Go make their life easy. They'll fight for you with their seller even to make sure that you get that property.
I 100% agree with that. I think those are fantastic tips for buyers, and certainly those are the ones that go back later and talk about how awesome their buyer's agent was, because they've saved money. They got a house that they're probably buying under market value that was a hidden gem that no one else knew about because it wasn't represented properly. So
that's it. Dustin, it's been awesome. Thank you very much for your time today. Unfortunately, we didn't get Holly, but maybe we could do a follow-up interview with her. Send her my best wishes. And remember, Team Bynum, they're in the high and low deserts. That's their specialty, but all the way up from Kern down to just north of San Diego, right?
That's correct.
All right. And you can always give us a call, and we'll connect you with them. They're some of the top agents out there. That's why I'm interviewing them, and that's why we're in the same mastermind, because not only are we weekend warriors, not weekend warriors, and work this job full-time, but we try to perfect our craft by being in masterminds as well. Whatever you're doing, masterminds should help you perfect yourself and perfect your business as well. Once again, this is Roman Shersher. I'm your #1 resource for buying properties online. You guys take care. Check us out. Follow us. Like us. See you soon.
Thank you, Roman.
Thank you, Dustin.